And welcome to the Wednesday, January 13th, 2016 Planning Board for the Town of Raymond. The board does have a quorum, and we'll start with roll call.
Sheila Burke, here.
Greg Foster.
Robert O'Neill.
Bruce Sanford.
Bill Priest.
And with us from the staff is James Seymour, Stephanie Carver, remember the last name there, and Chris Hansen. The board does work from a scheduled agenda. The first thing that we will take up is the minutes from our December 9th meeting, and then we'll move to a public hearing for the potential ordinance revisions for the 2016 town meeting warrant. We do have a few correspondences which we will take care of, and since there are no applications, I'll skip reading all that, in addition to the fact I forgot the verbiage. So we will start with the minutes for December 9th. Are there any changes, additions?
Well, since we have two question marks on who made the final motion, I don't know if we can look at the record, but it says William Priest, question mark, moved to adjourn.
Yeah.
Greg Foster, question, moved to, seconded.
Let's just say yes.
Let's just say yes.
All true.
I move to accept the minutes as corrected.
Is there a second?
Second.
Question mark after this?
No.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Passes. All right, the next is up is our public hearing, and what we'll do with this is we will take these one ordinance at a time. The packet that you guys made, is this available for, kind of the brief summary of the changes? Did we get copies of that for anybody?
That was online,
Okay,
so people had access to read it
all right,
or request a copy.
okay,
And then they have the full version as well.
online,
Online.
okay.
And
All
the
right.
land use map is also online.
Okay. Okay, so what we will do is I will open the public hearing, and we will do it for, I think it's best if we do these at one at a time for each of the, so we'll take up the shoreland zoning provision map, then we'll go to shoreland zoning provisions, the land use ordinance, the land articles, Article 9, and then the land use ordinance, Article 12, and then the shoreland zoning provisions in Article 16. Followed by fees and penalties and land use ordinance, lot coverage, Articles 9 and Articles 12. Followed lastly by the fire protection, changes to the fire protection ordinance. I will ask them for comments then when we open the public hearing for each individual one as we go, and I would just ask that you, when you make your comments, please address the particular ordinance that we are in fact reviewing, and then you'll have an opportunity again to speak if you choose to on any of the following ordinances. I just ask that you keep your remarks fairly succinct so that we can get through these fairly quickly. And please, when you do make your remarks, please go to the podium and state your name and address, and then you're all set. Wasn't I forgetting anything? No? All right. So let's go, let's start with the shoreline zoning provision map. We'll have John give us a short overview of that, and then I'll open the public hearing and we can take questions.
Good evening, my name is John Giles. I work with at Spago Technics, and we're the town's mapping consultant. And what we're presenting tonight is a draft of the new land use regulation map. It's based on the existing land use regulation map, and what we've done is gone through and made some additional changes and some edits to it to bring it in line with Chapter 1000 of the state's statutes that define shoreland zoning and resource protection zones within shoreland zoning. The biggest changes that you'll notice on the map is that we have added a 250-foot buffer around some of these larger freshwater wetlands that did not have them before. Did not have them on the map. They existed statutorily, but they were not depicted on the map. So the net effect is the public looking at the old map was not aware that there was a 250-foot buffer around them. So by putting the buffer on the map now, it's just a way of giving everyone a heads up, the landowners a heads up. Here's a freshwater wetland, and there is in fact a 250-foot buffer around that freshwater wetland. What we also did in certain parts of town, you can see that somewhat here in Raymond Cape, we went in and photo interpreted the wetlands that were visible in high-resolution aerial photos and some LiDAR data. And what we actually did is attempted to map the wetland as it actually exists on the ground, as opposed to the way it was originally mapped back in the 70s on USGS topo maps, and also using Landsat satellite imagery. In many cases, what we were able to do is actually more accurately and more truthfully represent the extent of those wetlands than they were represented in the past. You can see this large area here was previously all shown as a wetland within the shoreline zone, therefore it was a resource protection zone. And what we were able to do is actually minimize the footprint of that wetland on the map by more accurately mapping it using better available data that wasn't available in the 70s.
Good, thanks, John.
Yep.
So the key changes is that the change of land use regulation map related to data updates may result in some minor changes to the shoreline zoning boundaries. Everything for as far as project-wise is done on the ground, but we did talk about one impact, right, Chris? One possible impact that the map would create, did we not, last time?
It had to do with forestry activities within the 250-foot.
Clearing of timber harvesting?
Timber harvesting, right, okay.
Yes, there are some changes in there, but that's in another section.
Okay. All right. Does the board have any questions? All right, then I will open up the public hearing. If anybody would like to ask John a question about the map or the proposed changes.
Yes.
Did I understand you to say that the
Excuse me,
last map?
Barbara, I know, but you gotta, sorry. Oh, here, we can pass you here.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Did I understand you to say that the last mapping per se was the 70s?
The mapping that is in the current land use regulation map for the town actually originated in the 70s and has been copied down through the decades and years and has ended up on this map. And what we're attempting to do now that there is better aerial photography and now this elevation data, we're able to fine tune the mapping and make it more representative of what's on the ground.
Certainly, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? Okay, then I will close that public hearing for the map section. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And we will go to the shoreline zoning provisions, sections 12, 13, 15, 16, and 17. I'll just quickly go through the key changes that are being proposed. It's going to revise definitions and updates to formatting of definitions, changes in the calculation method used to assess expansion of non-conforming structures, adjustments to the culvert sizing, changes to language outlining the requirements associated with clearing and revegetation requirements, and removal of hazards, storm damage, and dead trees, and new and revised definitions. The letter that we got, is that the definition that he was addressing in that particular section?
No,
It's later on, right?
It's later. It's
That's
in
later. Okay.
Section 17 and Article 12.
Okay. I guess I'll just, does the board have any questions? Do we want, do you need anything else? Okay. All right, so I will open the public hearing on the shoreline zoning provision proposed changes to section 12, 13, 15, 16, and 17. If there's anybody that'd like to speak to those.
Yes. My name is Mark Franco. I'm a resident of 75 Quarry Cove Road in Raymond. I'm not sure I have the complete information, but my comments refer to the sections 12 and 15. In the documentation I copied from the website, it's page 3. I'm not sure if this relates to Article 12 and shoreline zoning provisions, section 15.
Mm-hmm.
And this relates to the definition of driveway, terms driveway and driveway entrance.
No,
Is that-
you're in the wrong section.
Am I in a different section?
Yeah.
That's later.
Yep.
Oh, okay, I thought it was coming up on, under
Well, it
12
does.
and 15.
That's one of the things we need to talk about, because it does come in both shoreline zoning.
Yeah, because
It
it,
does, but this article doesn't involve
Okay.
that change.
It's
Yep, it'll
Change
come up.
it, right.
It does change, but it comes up
And
later.
it's the
So
same.
I
Hold
thought-
on, we're coming to it.
yeah, okay, I thought it was in both,
It is
shoreline
both,
and
but
land
it's
use.
specified in the warrant later.
Okay, great.
Okay, anybody else? All right, then I will close that public hearing on that section, and we'll move to land use ordinance, Articles 9. The key changes here are revisions to the language relating to the level of staff review, the language referencing best management practice guidelines, BMPs, has been added to the ordinance just for administrative purposes to match where it is in the other sections of the ordinance. And additional language related to stormwater calculations and techniques have been added to satisfy the stormwater and phosphorus management control permit points system, and requires a professional engineer to certify that the proposed alternative treatment meets the performance standards of those techniques identified in the ordinance. Staff have anything else to add to that? No? Does the board have any questions?
I don't. Jim, would you like to add anything to it?
I don't, I mean, I think we've been over it.
Yep.
The only reason that we're altering this is because we find at staff level, the point system was outdated, and we were caught because there were new practices approved by the main DEP and the BMPs for stormwater management, and they didn't reflect in our allowed point system. So we've updated the point system to account for those, and left the door open that if something comes along in the future, as long as they can prove an alternate source or measure with an engineering stamp of approval, it can be added.
Okay. Does the board have any questions? Okay, I will open up the public hearing for we'll do the proposed warrant changes to the land use ordinance Articles 9, the stormwater quality phosphorus control, the application review, and the point system. Would anybody like to? Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing, and we'll move to land use ordinance, which is number 4 in our packets. The key changes to number 4 in the land use ordinance, Article 12, and the shoreline zoning provisions, Article 15, are the definitions for driveway and driveway entrance, have been amended to provide a clearer understanding of the terms related to the parking uses. Does the board have any questions of staff on that? All right,
Thank you.
you're welcome, Mark.
Again, Mark Franco, 75 Quarry Cove Road. I had a hard time navigating the website in terms of trying to locate what the new language is going to be. And maybe, and I'm a little bit at a disadvantage. I see where it says the similar terms driveway and driveway entrance have been refined and clarified, but I'm not sure where that is and how they've been clarified. But if I'm allowed, what I'd like to ask is what was the rationale, the impetus, the reason?
We're doing it.
Yes.
Would you, we could find the exact verbiage, you have it really, I mean, it's in
Yeah, I
this
was
packet.
actually gonna, I should have cut in before this, but we have there's a revised version of this. There's actually an error in the description where, in the article, excuse me, where it says driveway. There should be a new definition for driveway, which did not exist before in the land use ordinance, and that part is there. But in the shoreland zoning provisions, we should have listed the existing definition for driveway and had that as a strike through. And then I should have put in the new definition. So I have a
Okay.
revised sheet, if anybody wants to see the way it should have been laid out. And also give it to the board.
Okay.
And I apologize for that mistake.
But
Could you,
again.
could you just read while you're there, the actual verbiage?
So, the driveway definition
Chris.
for both is, access route or right-of-way to any single-family dwelling, duplex, or multifamily building, if so allowed in a zone, except where buildings are developed as a part of a larger subdivision. For other allowed non-residential uses, the term shall mean any primary emergency or maintenance access route used for vehicular ingress or egress from a location off a public or private right-of-way. All non-residential and multifamily dwelling driveways shall conform to the applicable design requirements as provided in Article 10 Site Plan Review, F, Performance Standards.
Read the old, do you have the old one?
The old one in the shoreline zoning provisions read, that's section 17, definitions, shoreline zoning provisions. Driveway was defined as a vehicular access way less than 500 feet in length, serving 2 single-family dwellings or 1 two-family dwelling or less. So basically, the proposed language would be replacing that definition in both. It'd be the same language in both the land use ordinance and the shoreline zoning provisions.
Okay, so this doesn't relate to, and this only relates to single-family dwellings, duplex, or multifamily buildings.
The current
Correct.
definition,
Not the proposed.
not the
Right,
proposed.
and in the proposed for other allowed non-residential use, the term shall mean any primary emergency.
Oh, I see, right.
See, it goes on
Yeah,
to.
I got it, non-residential use, primary emergency maintenance. So, I can understand expanding the definition over the old definition, because the old definition was quite limiting and restrictive. But I guess I'd be curious as to what the basis was, the rationale, the reasoning for including the non-residential use to include emergency or maintenance access, ingress, and egress.
You mean, basically, why are we changing?
Right.
Well, to be all, I guess the easiest answer to that is to be all encompassing. So the limitations of what we have right now does not apply, does not apply to all of our, to any application, to all applications, I could say. Is there a better answer that?
I think you hit it. I think that we saw the deficiency, and immediately the board wanted to, sorry, the board wanted to clarify that, and in doing so, we realized that we have sometimes driveway loops that are one-way circulation, so when is a driveway not a driveway? Is it the egress, is it the ingress? And then from the fire department standpoint too, there are, emergency access driveways, and from a design standpoint, we want to have those all encompassing. We don't break them down into their individual driveway components. We have one definition that's
In one standard.
broad. Obviously, in the land use zone, land use ordinance, there wasn't even a definition, which was surprising. And in the shoreline zoning, as you could see, it was very vague, only applying to single-family and multiplex developments. And the idea is that we have commercial, business, non-residential driveways all over Raymond, and what would you do if somebody came in and wanted to, have an allowed use and put a driveway in?
Didn't we run into a problem off of a private road, the project that we were running, that we did off the project?
We've had it come up a couple different times, and it usually comes up in the smaller projects. A lot of these that make it to the board, end up being full-blown, larger private roads altogether, but it comes up a lot at the staff level, too.
So, am I correct in stating that this definition was not drafted as a result of the Town of Fry Island's unsuccessful attempt to put in the parking lot?
No, not at all. And in fact, it would not have made a difference in either of those in that application, because the town attorney had already ruled that the driveway that you are referring to for emergency access met the requirements of the ordinance as it was written.
But in the de novo process, they reversed that
Right.
interpretation. And I think that led to us finally realizing that, we've got to clear this language up, because it left the Board of Appeals and the Planning Board in a state where they had to get a legal interpretation, and that's not what we want with our definitions. We want them clear enough so that we don't need to involve lawyers and legal services.
So this revised definition was in part the result of that confusion?
Some part of it. I think that we've had enough of it all throughout many applications that we just need to clarify it.
No, we didn't.
It was a lack of a definition.
We have not run into it in one single project. We've run into it
Multiple
a number of
examples.
times over the last couple of years.
As a matter of public knowledge, public information, did the Town of Fry Island submit this proposed language for review and consideration?
No.
They did not? Neither they nor their attorneys?
I might add to this discussion. I'm a brand-new planning board member when all of this material was brought to us, and that was not the focus of any discussion or reasoning. I can say, sitting from the newbie point of view, that it was a much broader discussion than I'm aware, but not really of any of the facts of the Fry Island situation, because I'm new. And it's been pretty much discussed in terms of the need for expansion and clarification of that driveway definition. So
Okay.
if that helps you any.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if we're not at 15G of the shoreline zone discussion yet, right? That's okay, because that's a dovetail issue for me. So that's
Okay.
why I want to bring it up again, and how that relates to 15G, and how the revisions to 15G basically, in essence, change the whole picture of the driveway issue as it relates to that parking lot.
Okay.
Okay.
This is 15.
This is 15G too.
He's referring to the shoreline.
We're referring to the second part of this.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, you, don't go.
okay, so, I don't, you didn't, the language in, the revised language in 15G, as I understand it, under the shoreland zone, says off-site parking lots shall be allowed if they are within 300 feet of the lot containing the associated permitted use as measured from the center line of that lot's driveway to the center line of the driveway of the off-site parking. All off-site parking lots shall meet the following additional requirements. That's what the new
Correct.
definition.
Right.
And if the planning board, and I apologize for
She-
the information that
Yeah.
you may not be aware, but in the proposed plan submitted to the planning board by the Town of Fry Island, there was a primary ingress driveway, and then there was a emergency, there was what was trying to be described as a driveway for emergency vehicle ingress, if you will.
Right.
And the distinction was made, and it was an important distinction with respect to that 300-foot issue.
Yep.
So under this revised definition, that Town of Fry Island application would arguably meet the requirement of that 300-foot distance under the new definition of driveway, because the new definition of driveway would include emergency ingress, egress.
Yeah, and I think what Jim was trying to tell you is that there, two boards have looked at that. That when the planning board looked at that, we decided, based upon legal counsel, that it met, that driveway or that access met the definition of our driveway for that 300-foot purpose. Now, and the appeals board, which doesn't normally deal with those applications, they reversed and they felt that it did not. So as far as this board is concerned, we are fairly consistent in that, in that we're not seeing any change to this, because we're seeing that it's exactly the same as it was when we worked on it for that particular project. But again, the changes were not put in place for Fry Island or not for Fry Island. I mean, the planning board does not write ordinances for a particular project. In fact, we work very hard not to write ordinances for particular projects, because there's no way that you just cannot fairly enforce ordinances that are written specifically for an individual project or as a result of a proposed application. We have no application from Fry Island before the planning board at this time. There's no pending application.
I understand that, but you will once this is passed. I mean, if it's passed by the
If it's
town
passed-
in a warrant.
But again, we found the same as we found I mean, if the board is consistent with what it found last time based upon the legal attorney, and if that be the only issue, I'm assuming, and I don't know how the board would vote, but I'm assuming we would find the same way that we did the last time that this issue came up. Again, based upon what our attorney advised us.
But also,
So, go ahead.
not that I want to get off on Front
Yeah,
Island, but
great.
one thing that also you have to account for is that now that application is deemed to have not passed, not been approved, and failed. So whatever they come back with has to
Has to
have
be different.
substantive changes to the plan. So it can't come back as the same plan. They have to change enough of that for the board to feel comfortable that they've altered the plan.
So the exact same plan cannot come back.
Well, if the plan meets definition of driveway, if a portion of the plan meets, they can move the plan, they can move the ingress or egress, quote, driveway. I think it's a walkway, frankly. It's not, you know, I wouldn't put a driveway of that width in front of my house, because it's, you know, yeah, emergency vehicle can get through it, barely, if you remember.
Mhm.
And it has a gate, and it's locked, and
Yep.
all that jazz. But it seems to me that they move it a foot, and it's a different plan.
But, Mark, I understand your concerns, but I can't let the whole conversation
No, and I
move to the Fry
and I don't
Island.
want to do that.
And I don't think
I
it's
just
fair.
want representation from this planning board that these definitions were not in response to the Fry Island application, and to sort of remedy their application for purposes of
I
a
can guarantee that,
reapplication. I just want to hear that from the board, that's all.
I guarantee it.
Okay? Thank you.
Sure.
Interesting.
Good evening, Kevin Fay, Spiller Hill Road, also property out in Lower Rim, Cape Wild Acres. I guess to follow up on Mr. Franco's remarks, I just want to comment that even though you've assured the audience here that changes are not made with respect to specific applications or in response to, you know, something passing or failing, I just want to observe that the optics on it would suggest otherwise. It just looks really, really problematic that the very factors that forced initially this board, and going back to the initial application that you folks approved, you ultimately, didn't you need a waiver of the 300-foot provision in order to provide that approval?
That's what you had two options. The
Right.
attorney was telling you that it passed on its merits.
Yeah.
Correct.
Board members were still uncomfortable, and you passed it on the waiver.
Do we pass on the waiver, or we pass on the attorney's?
No, you passed on a waiver.
Did we pass on the waiver?
Because
Yeah.
that was one of the other items that came up with the appeals,
Yeah.
was the failure to do written notice of the waiver request.
There was
That's right, okay, you're right.
to be honest with you, there was a lot of uncertainty about sort of what the attorney for the community was advising you folks, because it waffled back and forth, I think, across several meetings about what was waivable, what was not waivable, so on and so forth. So that portion of it, it was my understanding that the 300-foot provision, which is part of this revision, a factor, taking away the driveway entrance aspect of that, was one of the things that resulted in that, ultimately resulted in that application. Again, I'm going to have to go back to it. That application ultimately being overturned by the ZBA. That's part of it. And one of the arguments that the attorney for this applicant tried to argue, which I think most of the people in the room found patently absurd, was that this locked gate, this emergency egress, could pass as a driveway. And it just didn't come across well in that, in those proceedings, in those legal proceedings, and I think the ZBA agreed with it as well. That being the case, as I said earlier, the optics on this would suggest that literally the changes to this are being made almost in response. I mean, I know you can say it, and I have to believe you guys. You're my neighbors, you're honorable people, you're professionals. The optics on it, folks, are terrible. It literally looks to an outside observer who might look at this that it's literally being done almost examining, okay, what were the factors that resulted in this thing not moving forward, this thing being approved or not overturned or whatever, and what can we do to remedy that? That's what it looks like to an outside observer. I showed this, for instance, to a neighbor of mine, and actually I have it written down what he said because I thought it was actually pretty telling. His response was actually pretty troubling to read it. He asked me point blank, were these written by the town of Fry Island? Because they seem to have everything to gain here and there's nothing in it for Raymond. Really, who wrote these? And I know that was just posed by Mr. Franco, and he and I have not talked or corresponded or whatever, even though we have similar feelings on this. But it's interesting that that was the perspective that I showed literally a third party who kind of has tangential relationships to this, and that was his response. He was just like, was this literally developed by the town of Fry Island? Because whether they have to come back with something new or not, and I appreciate those comments as well. But who's to say that they do not come back, literally move some aspects of it, like, 30 to 40 feet, and then, like, that this fellow who's, like, had literally become, like, sort of taken up residence here, the Mr. Gray, I think was his name, he could modify this slightly and just say, here's our new application. And I know you must have standards for accepting sort of new things or whatever. But again, I'll just go back to sort of, it's such a trite term, but I think it applies here. The optics on this are so terrible. I mean, it's like you have people that have opposed this, folks literally in this neighborhood who have opposed this at every turn. And we literally took a breath and said, I think we're done with this. And now we're looking at ordinance changes that literally would provide a pathway for this community to come in, provide another application, and seek to gain approval. And I think as Mr. Franco had observed, I think they could probably get it to pass, because now it would pass, I think, based on sort of the way these things would conceivably be written. And it's just a real concern. I mean, I'm so concerned with, I guess it's the entirety of the thing is Article 5. Both the removal of the entrance component from the language and also the change in definitions to what constitutes a driveway. I'm just so concerned with it, and I think, again, it just looks bad, guys, and it's just sort of like it's just terribly troubling to sort of to see it. I mean, that's all I have to say. I mean, it's just like, maybe I'll make a couple observations later on, but it's just troubling. I'm sorry.
Is there anyone else that would like to address this?
I just have one really quick comment.
Go ahead, Mark.
My proposal would be that the language of driveway be changed to say, or to eliminate the words emergency or maintenance access route used for vehicular purpose. There's no reason why those words should be in that definition, none. If a driveway should be, for other allowed non-residential use, the term shall mean any primary access route used for vehicular ingress or egress from a location off a public or private right-of-way. Zero rationale for emergency or maintenance access route. It's designed, like you said.
Kind of makes sense. Why do we put that in there?
Well, because this is all encompassing. This isn't just Fry Island. I mean,
Right.
we have other situations where people do put in access or maintenance driveways. How do we regulate those if we don't have it in the definition? Or do you create a separate definition for maintenance and emergency driveways? There's several commercial developments that have how
What,
back
what
to a
would, what would be the
In the
definition
shoreline
of a-
zone?
What would be the definition of a maintenance?
you may have some
In the shoreline
What would be
zone?
the definition of a maintenance driveway?
That which would be for exactly what you said, emergency response, ambulatory, may be gated. We could create one.
Couldn't we roll that into some of our emergency access requirements for, for hammerheads and turning radiuses and all that?
That falls mostly under subdivision.
Right, yeah, that's true.
We're thinking site plan,
Yeah.
that's what we're thinking of here. I mean, the other thing we could do is like what we do with wetlands. You could have a main driveway definition, and underneath it, you could have sub-definitions for emergency or maintenance service driveways. And in the driveway, because we would just say, these are specialized driveway situations and are not to be, somehow we could word it so that it could not be contrived as a main or primary driveway use. I mean, it could be a sub-definition.
If you think about the intent of the language,
No,
there's a reason why there's 300 feet.
Well, actually, the intent of the 300 feet was actually an afterthought put into our discussions, and it was put in there because we didn't want people walking on the road further than 300 feet.
Agreed.
And that, it really had nothing to do.
The 300 feet was there originally.
Yeah.
It's there, yeah.
It's always been there.
Yeah.
And the whole premises of 300 feet was to keep pedestrians off the traveled way from the vehicles. So the idea was to, try to limit them and keep them as close to the use that they're
Right.
serving.
But I think that makes sense, Mark. I think,
Well,
I think that's.
I think we would be, as we sit around the room, be hard pressed to envision, and I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, a commercial enterprise / parking lot in the shoreland zone other than what the board has already dealt with. I mean, think about, in the history of Raymond, how many times has this issue ever come up in the shoreland zone? Once.
No, I mean the driveway issue?
No, this parking lot issue.
Oh, the parking lot issue.
Oh, we've had a couple.
We've had a couple, actually.
Boy Scouts was one, we've had a
Just
couple,
recent- yeah, within the
we've had
last-
another couple with camps
In the last
expanding.
3 or 4 years, we've had, actually probably 4. Yeah, 3 or 4 in the last
Okay.
3. Yeah,
Well,
about
I'll
once a
stand
year.
corrected, but
That's great.
I think that the intent is still, as I understand it, and I'm just reading this for the first time tonight, I think the intent can still be achieved by eliminating emergency or maintenance, or putting the emergency or maintenance in a subcategory that doesn't meet the definition of driveway.
Or we could just break out, call it secondary driveway, something like that, where you would categorize that as emergency and maintenance driveways.
Because typically, maintenance and emergency
Or one of the
is
same.
a
Right.
well, it is. It's the same, but it is different than primary egress and
Yep,
and
yep.
ingress. It's
Yep.
definitely different,
Yep, I agree with you.
okay?
Could we just
So-
take that
I
second
get-
sentence, the middle sentence right out of there?
Yeah,
But we don't want to lose the ability to,
Non-residential, you just want to take out emergency and maintenance, as he said.
right, out of the primary definition and then look at a
You want to take out,
subcategory?
I think what you want to take out is emergency or maintenance access.
Right.
Route.
And it would read just
You want to
primary
leave
route.
Yeah, just primary route.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that works for me.
And make a sub-definition.
And then we can make a sub-definition for
So you still
emergency.
have management.
Because we still want to be able to
Oversight.
capture that for standards and things like that in their location. We don't want to, necessarily put them, where
So-
they're blind in
Right.
some cases.
so let's use Kevin's term on his optics term. What does that do for you? If we take that out and move it as a sub,
Yeah, to be honest with you, that was another thing I was gonna raise, is that I'm a little concerned that we're just seeing, because there was an error in the materials that were able to be reviewed ahead of time. I got a whole folder of this stuff. I've been poring over this stuff for like a week, and I'm a little concerned that it's like, this is a public hearing, this is like, people are seeing this, I'm seeing this for the first time. I'm not a planner, but I kind of feel like when I play one on TV nowadays.
Stay at Holiday Inn.
I figured Holiday Inn Express. But, so I'm not sure, I don't want to sort of say, yeah, that works for me, because I'm not sure it works for me.
okay.
So it's just
Well,
like,
all right.
how would it read? I mean, and like.
Well, they would read exactly as it reads now, except the terms emergency or maintenance access would be removed.
So it
So,
would just say, mean any primary route used for,
Right.
vehicle
so in
purposes.
other words, going, do I have to go back there?
No, that's it.
Okay, so in other words, going back to sort of like the remark I made about sort of when the attorney for the applicant in question tried to make the argument that the walkade on either end, emergency access, was in fact a driveway, amidst sort of like the smirks and so forth from the assembled audience. And that was, you know, I think the folks seated where you folks are, you know, smirked at it as well and didn't buy it. Again, she was just doing lawyering, and that's her job. Would that pass the muster if that wording is changed here in that app? And I know you can't focus on one application, I'm sensitive to that and I appreciate it. But I think that's why the folks that are in this room tonight are here, because it's like they're terribly worried about this.
I understand that.
So I think, like, I don't wanna say, yeah, that looks great, when if it in agreeing to that may actually in fact pave the way for a subsequent sort of like resubmission or whatever with similar terms and configuration and so forth, because these guys are masters at sort of like noodling the thing a little bit and coming back to you guys and coming back next month and tabling it and coming back again.
Are you talking about yourself now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Going for a friend. But yeah, so it's just like, I don't know how, and it's funny, I don't know when to open it up for other comment and stuff like that, but it's just like,
Well,
Well, could I
go ahead.
add something?
Yep.
With this process that we have, this is a public hearing tonight to move things along to the Board of Selectmen. There'll be another hearing at town meeting, and you'll have another chance to speak at this at the Selectmen's meeting. So you've got more opportunity to review it and interpret it, and this is just part of the process. It's not the end of the process.
And then ultimately you have the final say, or the town has the final say
With
with
the
the
vote.
vote.
that's true, but it's just sort of like, I mean, I guess.
Well, these warrant articles are always a moving target. The town attorney's gonna get her input in next, that'll get passed along. It's always evolving. And it is part of the process.
I mean, I do think, and this isn't my form or whatever, but it's just sort of like, it does seem better. So it's like, I guess you guys pass things on to the select board.
Yes.
Yeah, they can make a friendly amendment to this evening and pass it on, or they can pass it on as it is, or they can hold it up.
You can simply
question I
state
have,
that an emergency or maintenance access route is not within the definition of driveway above.
Right.
That's
Yeah, you can say secondary access. and-
secondary.
you
It
know.
constitutes a secondary access and does not constitute a driveway, which is a primary access.
I'd almost recommend that we call it a secondary access, primarily because we stay away from the whole driveway connotation to that.
That's a great idea.
I agree.
That's a good idea.
Now, the question I have is it possible for a lot to have only an emergency or only a maintenance access to the lot with no other driveway?
No, it has to have a primary,
Okay.
has to have a primary entrance for access for the use.
Should we include language in this that emergency and maintenance access routes into the lot are treated separately under
Yeah, we call it a
section
we wouldn't
whatever,
call- we
and
wouldn't call
include
it-
that language in here
Yeah,
too?
I wouldn't recommend calling it a driveway, because we want to stay away from the
Right.
connotation, because driveway gets enveloped into other uses and other terms.
We don't want somebody coming back
So
and
we would
saying,
call
well,
it a
this
secondary-
primary, the emergency route is the primary route.
Well, what we call it is secondary access, which
Okay.
would be, and we define it as being for maintenance or emergency access only, for service of a lot which already has a primary entrance for its use.
I think that makes sense.
So we're talking about making a separate definition
Be a
for
second
Yes.
definition in that
Yep.
section.
secondary access in that section.
Let me get Barbara in first, because she's been waiting patiently.
Oh, I would just like to add to Mark's and Kevin's remarks that I totally agree, and we're not alone. We're few in number in this room right now, but we do represent more feelings about this that we have felt for a long time, that it is at best tainted. And I would like to suggest that this particular article be tabled. Now, that is not a new term for this group, but it would give you and it would give us time to really think more about it. We would appreciate having input, concrete input And I would suggest something to you that has, its nucleus is very, very small, but we are considering, along with compatriots in Fry Island and their governance, a contract zone. This is a very unique situation, Raymond Cape, because it is so much shorter.
Yeah, I don't think you want to go there.
And it troubled me about when Jim said all encompassing. It's so different. That's why I think that, and you've had experience with a contract zone. Some might have felt burned, some might have felt pretty good about it. But I do see merit in that, and I wondered, and I would like to suggest that this particular aspect this evening, Article 5, I call it 5, but whatever.
I think it is right.
That it is tabled for more consideration and thought, and direct your thoughts to a contract zone because of the uniqueness of the Cape, the uniqueness of possibilities that are going to happen down at our end of the Cape. And I put that to you this evening.
Chair, just one item. We've got two different things going here.
Yeah.
Fry Island is a whole separate thing.
Right.
We don't have contract zones for definitions.
No.
So we're just dealing with the definitions. So, but I think it is, you can take your advisement whether you want to table this or have more time to whatever. But just want to make that.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this topic?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with one thing. I think one of the things by changing this definition and eliminating the egress thing from the driveway definition, I do think it sort of like eliminates sort of the kind of remarks that I made earlier about sort of like you can't then sort of like say that emergency access with the application in question can be a driveway. Because I think one of the things that I think was worrisome is that when those of us who are assembled here, who kind of this is near and dear to us, what's to keep the folks out on Fry Island from basically saying, you know what, I'm done with these gates. I'm going to take these gates down and use it as an actual driveway. They told me it was a driveway.
Okay, let's not go on that one, but that's
We're
not.
not here to
that's not
discuss
an issue.
that project.
Yeah.
And
I understand, but I think therethere's value in, the definition
Okay.
changes that
Thanks,
you
Kevin.
suggested. Okay.
All right, anybody else that would like to talk on this topic? All right. And I think I will close the public hearing on this. While we proceed on, could one of you guys work on the language that it may read so that we could possibly vote this
Get that-
evening
yeah, get
as
that
to whether or
changed.
not it's, we would approve it with it?
give me a
And
second. I need a few minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can have a few minutes. We'll leave you alone.
Do my William Shakespeare over here.
Yeah. And then we can come back to this and we'll read that and we'll get Mark and Kevin's. Can you guys stick around for a little bit? Sure. And we'll get their take. Okay, so we will then, I'm going to close the public hearing on Raymond Land Use Ordinance 12 and 15, and we will move to item 5.
Article 6.
Article 6.
What did I do? Did I miss one?
No.
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 Oh, yes, right. Yeah, number 5 on my sheet, right, I'm sorry, Article 6. The key changes being, these amendments state that decisions of the planning board will not be reviewed by the Board of Appeals, but rather go directly to Superior Court. The Board of Appeals shall review a decision of the code enforcement officer in a de novo hearing, amends the time period for appeals to Superior Court to 45 days to be consistent with state statute. Mary is not here to talk about that, but is there anybody that is interested?
I just have one comment before we open it.
Sure.
That we've discussed this quite a bit, and that it's consistent with standard practice. This is kind of the way that it's done in most other towns and in the area, and we're also, trying to be consistent. So, it just reads like we just came up with this, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, and to what Jill said, which I don't have tonight, but my very yellowed copy that was passed down to me, that was passed down about probably from 4 or 5 chairmen, because it had coffee stains and fingerprints on it, said that any project that is disapproved or approved depending on the side, had to go to Superior Court. It was always our board's understanding that that is in fact what happened, because that's state law, the way it goes. Not to talk about our particular case, but in that particular case, the lawyers got together and I guess that was not the case, and our ordinances was lacking and should have, even though we said it every day, at every meeting, the ordinance had to specifically state it. So that's why we now have this, because it has always been our understanding, according with state law's understanding, according with standard practice, that this is the process that every other town goes through. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions from the board? Staff?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
All right.
Public hearing's open.
Yeah, I'll wait over here.
This is like a two-edged sword thing for me, because I'm a municipal lawyer. I defend municipalities, and it's a great provision for me, because that means that there's no intermediate step that I may or may not get involved in. There's a direct appeal to the Superior Court, and then I get hired by you or by another town. And so what you're doing, just so you know, in some instances, I'm not saying all, you're forcing the applicant, the unsuccessful applicant, to hire a lawyer right away and go to Superior Court. You're forced to hire your own lawyers, Bernstein, Schur, or whatever, to defend the case, and all of a sudden, you're off to the races with litigation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and this has got nothing to do with the Fry Island thing, because, but here's the rub with the Fry Island thing, I'll tell you this. They didn't appeal to the Superior Court, is my understanding. Maybe they did, but
The time period's
No.
passed.
it's passed, right? They didn't appeal. So you're not incurring legal expenses because of that intermediate step of going through the ZBA.
Mm-hmm.
So again, two-edged sword for me. I get hired more often on direct appeals to Superior Court than I do in intermediate appeals through the ZBA, because they save me to represent the town at the end. So the municipal lawyers, represent the ZBA. You have like 4 lawyers at these things sometimes, because everyone's interested. So again,
Is that because you have too many lawyers?
it's consistent. Yes, you definitely do. But it's consistent. You're right. It's consistent with state law and whatever. You're not violating any state laws. I'm just saying, be careful what you ask for. That's all. That's just an observation. I don't have a dog in the fight.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I appreciate the open forum. I'm Peter Morgan, live on Bridges Lane at the tip of Raymond Cape. And I want to echo what was just stated here and in support of maintaining the status quo so that the objections can be heard without going to the added expense of incurring lawyers. And frankly, residents that I've talked to are all pleased with the outcome. Again, I'm referring to Fry Island, I'm sorry. But I haven't heard any resident in Raymond disappointed with the way the process proceeded. Unless, of course, your residents, I can't speak for you, but no one's come to me and said, geez, I really want that result to be overturned. I want them to go to Superior Court and pursue it further. But I thank you for the dialogue.
You're welcome.
I would just add that if the public knew what we spent for attorney fees to represent the Zoning Board of Appeals, that's the flip side of that.
Right.
We spent a tremendous amount of money to represent the Planning Board and the Appeals Board, and we had a separate attorney that came in to oversee the meeting. So we were paying 3 lawyers for the Zoning Board. So there's a flip side to that.
Right.
If it went to Superior Court, maybe the town wouldn't have incurred that expense. It would, maybe not, I don't know.
And my observations from sitting in on both sides of Novo and that were, the zoning board admittedly said it was familiar with zoning from spatial standards and from uses, but when they got into the actual application of site plan requirements and standards, they felt out of their league. And I think that's the difference between appeals on a subdivision or a setback or, you know, a porch or and how it all sits, or a particular use and how it functions, versus a site plan where you get into all the intricate details and requirements. I think
And the rules.
And the rules. They're not familiar with them.
Right.
And I think that's
That
where
is
the
the biggest-
discomfort,
that is the
there's a
biggest
lot of
problem.
discomfort on their side as well. I mean,
Right.
I don't think they're comfortable overturning your decision.
Yeah.
Because the terminology is a little bit different, and they're looking at it literally, and you're looking at it as a little bit, I don't want to say not literally, but you're interpreting what is implied.
Right.
And you have the expertise to do that.
Yes, Barbara?
Pardon, this may be a little bit terse, but I will say that the ZBA did a wonderful job. They may have felt overwhelmed at the beginning, but they stepped up to the task and did a good job.
Oh.
And then as far as numbers of lawyers, I think it was a matter of employing good, better, best. And they went toward a top drawer lawyer at the ZBA to really advise and counsel, and then he did a good job as well.
Nobody is saying they didn't do a good job. That's not what
Well,
we're
I
saying.
just wanted to go on record.
It's a different apple and oranges. All right, anybody else that wants to talk specifically on this issue?
One point of confusion here, and it's part of my confusion.
Okay.
Do I need to restate myself?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. I will add that it's just sort of like, this was kind of a bear to get through. Generally, it was like the layout and the organization was challenging. Again, I'm not used to looking at these materials, so it was probably part of that was on me. I'm looking at, I guess, of the warrant article, section 16, administration, G, appeals, point 1. I see some inconsistency there, and I don't know if C is intended to be a strike-through or not.
That's added language.
Added language.
Is it added? I see an inconsistency between A and C, unless I'm not used to reading these things even less than I thought I was. A seems to suggest that on a de novo basis,
It's a different appeal.
different appeal
It's an administrative appeal.
between A and C?
In A, it says code enforcement officer or
planning board.
That's supposed to be struck, but it came out underlined. We've already picked up on that.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
like, again,
It will be changed.
again, in that, this is a little bit concerning, because it's like the materials that people like myself and others who are not here are reviewing, and we've been in correspondence with others who are not here. When we see material like this, it's like we get all sort of in a twist and so forth, and it's like, I know, I guess it's part of the process of going through this, but it's like when you're reviewing materials that I guess are not final and maybe even appropriate to be judged in this fashion. I don't know. I don't want to like make too much of a deal out of it, but it's just sort of like I spent a lot of time trying to review this and thinking, okay, what am I missing here? So.
Call Chris.
Oh, he doesn't want to hear from me. So, all right. So it's like, so
All right.
that's cleared up?
That's very clear,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, any other comments on Article 6? All right, so I will close the public hearing on Article 6. We'll move to land ordinance subdivision regulations and the fire protection ordinance.
No, fee schedule.
It's a fee schedule,
Fee
right?
schedule is next, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. So the changes in the ordinance language, the specific changes are the changes to the ordinance language. I replace specific fee language with reference to the fee schedule.
Yeah. It's page 50.
Is there a word? I think this is pretty common. Staff, do you have anything you want to add?
No, it's literally a sentence
Yep.
that we're
Is,
adding to clarify.
Public hearing, does anybody would like to speak to the fees changes? All right, seeing none, I'll close that. And we'll move to Article 9, Section Q, and Article 12, definitions. The key changes here is a change in definition from lot coverage to lot structural coverage. Chris, could you give us a quick on what actually that means?
We looked at the definition of lot coverage in the shoreline zone and the land use ordinance, and they were contradictory, and so we just cleaned it up. It's more of a house. We've been doing that this way, but it just makes it clear in the ordinance.
Right. Again, legal counsel has told us that any changes, even if they be administrative, have to go through warrant changes, so that's why it's there. I'll open the public hearing for land use ordinance Article 9, Section Q, or Article 12. Is there anyone that would like to talk to it? Right. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing for that, and we will move to the fire protection ordinance. The key changes being amends to fees, code references, and general reformatting of the ordinance, and also a new criteria requiring the review of fire alarm systems installed or alteration, and a requirement of smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors with the installation of solid fuel burning devices. And trying to remember what the changes were actually, the impact change, which I didn't bring with me.
Most of it was housekeeping. We went from Boca code to the MUBEC codes.
Yeah, but there was two.
And then
Some reformatting.
And then some reformatting.
But there was two impacts.
That was, one, if you get a solid fuel burning permit, there's gonna be a requirement to have a carbon monoxide detector in the home.
Yep.
And the other one was, they're gonna be required to get a permit for the alarm, so that the fire department can keep track of what's going on and how they're maintained, and make sure that they're installed properly.
Okay. Does the board have any questions?
Two is for the public safety and
Right.
making sure that.
Yeah, but I knew there was two changes, two impacts, and I just wanted to make sure we covered that. So I will open the public hearing for the fire protection ordinance changes. Is there anybody who would like to talk to that? Okay, seeing none, I will close that, and I think that does it. Right, that was our last one? Yep.
Do we have any,
Yeah. Drafted something, we can play with it, work with it, see how it sounds.
Let's, yeah, a little,
You wanna hear it?
yeah, let me get my marker again.
Article 5.
Article 5. Rich, you got that one sheet?
I just was turning the pages.
Page 39.
Jeez, you guys.
Page
You're out.
39.
All right.
So we struck, as we already stated, we struck maintenance and emergency. When we get to page 39,
Access.
I just went to page 39, so I'm on the same thing, yep. So we're gonna strike emergency or maintenance access, and then we'll have a secondary access definition, and that will read, access routes, paths, or ways whose function is to serve a permitted use on a lot for the purpose of emergency response or maintenance service, or for any other temporary function to serve the lot. Such secondary access shall be considered temporary and shall not meet the requirements or definition of driveway.
Mark, if you want to come up and read over your shoulder, you're
No,
more than welcome to.
I heard it, and I think it's well done. I don't have any proposed amendments to that, changes to that. I mean, yeah, I was wondering about the temporary thing, that was the only, yeah, it kind of struck me, because, you know.
The use of the word temporary in the second
Means
half
that
of the
it's
sentence
only-
implies that an emergency or maintenance
Maybe
is
a permanent.
temporary,
Right.
but it might be paved
Might
over.
be a
No,
permanent
take out
second.
temporary.
Just take out
It's
temporary.
process.
Yeah,
Yep. So
Yeah, I
now
agree.
Now it'll read, access routes, paths, or ways whose function is to serve a permitted use on a lot for the purpose of emergency response or maintenance service, or for any other function to serve the lot. Such secondary access shall be considered temporary, there it is again, and shall not meet the requirements or definition of driveway.
I would just strike the word temporary, and it just says it doesn't meet the definition of driveway.
Shall be considered, be considered, such secondary access shall not meet the requirements or definition of driveway.
Period, yeah, that works.
Can we read the whole thing so we're clear?
Yeah, go ahead, Lamar.
Access routes, paths, or ways whose function is to serve a permitted use on a lot for the purpose of emergency response or maintenance service, or for any other function to serve the lot. Such secondary access shall not meet the requirements or definition of driveway.
I wonder if we should say, or any other non-primary function that services the lot.
Want that? One more time. Access routes, paths, or ways whose function is to serve a permitted use on a lot for the purpose of emergency response or maintenance service, or for any other non-primary function to serve the lot. Such secondary access shall not meet the requirements or definition of driveway.
Sounds good.
Should we get another primary?
So impact or intent with that?
That'd be,
I don't see any really.
You can
the
just do it
changes
as
due.
a friendly amendment to the.
No, I'm talking about what our goal was to start with.
No, I think it's fine.
Yeah, and actually it's looking a little
I think it's
better.
better, actually.
Yeah,
We would actually include that as a second paragraph under Article 12.
Be just another
Sub
definition.
Just another one.
Yeah.
Just be another definition.
Oh,
I would just put it as another
As in-
definition.
okay.
okay.
I don't think it even needs to go into driveway, just have it as a standalone.
right.
Okay.
And cross over to our other ordinances
It goes on both shoreland and
and,
land use. It's in both definitions.
okay?
Essentially, that's where ZBA left you anyway.
Sorry?
That's where the ZBA left you.
Yeah. All right.
You know, one motion to send all of these to the Board of Selectmen for,
I think we can. I think that,
That's how you did it last time.
that's how we did it last time. I think though that the motion, we would just have to make sure that we're, the motion for, is going to reflect the language, the changed
The
language.
friendly amendment. or
Friendly,
whatever you want to-
yeah,
whatever you want to call it.
Right,
I so moved then.
all right.
I second.
Okay, so, just to make sure we've got it, so the motion is to send to the Board of Selectmen, recommending approval for each of our proposed ordinances for the shoreline zoning map provision, the land use ordinance, the land, section Article 9, the land use ordinance Article 12, and 15, as modified this evening, the shoreline zoning provision 16G and Article 6, the land use ordinance subdivision regulation and the fire protection ordinance were fees, the fees for penalties and ordinances, and the land use ordinance Article 9 and Article 12 definitions, along with the fire protection.
Do we need to
ordinance.
vote first on striking the word emergency and maintenance access from Article 12, or is that just an administrative thing and we can vote on
I
the
think that's-
change?
Yeah, we're voting on the change,
administrative
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
That's just what I would have said.
Well, yeah, that's what I figured.
So we have,
There is a
I
second, is there
second
any, second, is there any discussion? We all?
Yes, I am.
All right, all those in favor? Opposed? All right, they pass.
Nice to have you all here, by the way. Thank you.
It was good, actually, I'm glad you guys, I think that's a better ordinance. All right, we are to, consideration for a candidate for our open position. Did everybody get,
Kyle Bancroft.
yeah, I don't know what happened to mine, but, oh, there it is. Has anyone been in contact with Cal besides doing this?
The only person I know of that's been in contact with is Sue, the town clerk, and they made their application through her.
Okay.
Got put on the agenda. I don't know whether they recommended they come to the meeting or not. I have had no communication with Kyle.
In the past, we've done that.
Yeah, we usually ask them just to
We've
come.
asked them to give a
Right.
bio. and a
I
little bit
would
of their-
suggest postponing it until the next meeting. I will get all of them, to make sure they come to the next meeting so they can stand up and introduce themselves.
Are you in plural now, or them?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
We may have more by then. I'm being optimistic.
I gotta get a bigger table.
Need a bigger boat.
All right, so we're done there. Planner, you have any communications for us?
There's no new communications that I'm aware of. Chris, you have anything?
No, there will be an application coming in for the schools for some new turf fields. It's going through the state right now, and sometime in the next couple of months, we'll probably get a couple applications.
Oh, good, we could use some work, other than that. All right, it's that time.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Yay.
Done.